Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Unrest continues in Iran. Death toll in clashes between protesters and security forces rises to 646. Trump mulls options on US response as Tehran stresses that the communication lines are open. US President Donald Trump announces 25% tariff on countries doing business with Iran effective immediately. Illinois and Minnesota sue Trump administration over immigration crackdown. Tensions rise after fatal shooting by a federal officer of a Minnesota woman. Venezuelan opposition figure Maria Corina Machado to meet US President Donald Trump on Thursday as pressure grows on the interim leadership in Caracas to speed up the release of political prisoners. Top Indian shuttlers Lakshya Sen and Ayush Shetty to be in action as the India Open begins today in New Delhi. As unrest continues to rattle Iran, violent crackdown on a wave of protests has killed over 646 people as Iranian authorities sought to regain control of the streets with mass nationwide rallies. The government's call for rallies in support of the Islamic Republic drew thousands on Monday. Iran's foreign minister said security forces have full control of the country after 2 weeks of violent unrest. Tehran said on Monday it was keeping communication channels with Washington open as President Trump considered how to respond to Iran's deadly crackdown on nationwide protests. At a press conference in Tehran, Arakchi accused the US and Israel of playing a direct role in recent unrest across Iran. He said the Iranian government has obtained evidence showing the recent disturbances, including attacking police stations and burning public facilities, were carried out by terrorists backed by the US and Israel. Meanwhile, Trump said on Sunday the US may meet Iranian officials and he was in contact with Iran's opposition while piling pressure on its leaders. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters on Monday, while airstrikes were one of the many alternatives open to Trump, diplomacy is always the first option for the president.
Well, I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table. And airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president. He's told all of you last night that what you're hearing publicly from the Iranian regime is quite differently from the messages the administration is receiving privately. And I think the president has an interest in exploring those messages. However, with that said, the president has shown he's unafraid to use military options if and when he deems necessary, and nobody knows that better than Iran.
US President Donald Trump said that he had imposed a 25% tariff on goods from countries with commercial ties with Iran as Washington weighs a response to the situation in Iran. Trump said on social media that the tariff was effective immediately without offering details of what constituted doing business with Iran. The new tariff comes after Trump threatened to intervene militarily if Tehran killed protesters. Trump said the US may meet Iranian officials and that he was in contact with Iran's opposition while piling pressure on its leaders, including threatening military action. Let's get to updates from Venezuela now. Opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado will meet President Trump this Thursday. Machado said last week that she hoped to thank Trump personally for the action against Maduro and would like to give the Nobel Prize to him. Trump called it a great honor, but the Nobel Committee later clarified that it was not transferable. However, Trump has declined to endorse Machado, whose movement claimed victory in 2024's widely contested elections, as its new leader. Mercado visited the Vatican on Monday, where she met Pope Leo and asked him to intercede for all Venezuelans who remain kidnapped and disappeared. Meanwhile, over 10 days after U.S. captured Nicolas Maduro and brought him to the U.S. to face drug charges, the acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, confirmed the country's sovereignty and independence, saying she is the actual leader of the nation.
Well,
we ratify and reaffirm Venezuela's sovereignty and independence. I have seen there around cartoons on Wikipedia asking, who rules in Venezuela? Well, here there's the government ruling in Venezuela. Here there's an acting president and a hostage president in the United States. We rule along with the organized people, along with the popular power, and move forward in the international relations with respect for the international law to reclaim and protect the rights of our beloved Venezuela.
The comments came after Trump shared on social media a fake Wikipedia profile of himself as the acting president of Venezuela on his platform Truth Social on Sunday. However, Washington has so far backed Rodriguez in her recent role, describing her as an ally. Significantly, she has not been charged by U.S. officials with any crimes. Back in Washington, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters that Trump was pleased with the cooperation of Venezuelan leaders.
I think the last week has shown that the president made the right, realistic assessment of what needed to take place in Venezuela at this moment in time. And the interim authorities and Delcy Rodriguez and her team have been very cooperative with the United States and the president and his team, as evidenced by the massive energy deal that the president was able to cut with the interim authorities, their commitment to release Venezuelan political prisoners, which we also saw last week. So we've seen a great level of cooperation, and the president expects that to continue.
In a major announcement, Venezuelan government said that it has so far released 116 political prisoners as part of process announced last week, though the rights groups reported a lower figure, urging the government to speed up the release process. The move is a long-running demand of human rights groups, international bodies and opposition figures. According to the country's human rights organization, For a Panel, at least 800 people were being held as political prisoners at the beginning of the year in Venezuela. The government said detainees, both foreign and Venezuelan, had been involved in acts associated with disrupting the constitutional order and undermining the stability of the nation. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul said on Monday that NATO allies must work together to ensure security, stressing that Greenland's future should be decided by Greenland and Denmark and not the United States. He spoke after meeting U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington, D.C. as tensions grow over President Trump's claim that Greenland should belong to the U.S. for security reasons. He described the talks as friendly and said that they reaffirmed the importance of the transatlantic alliance, but joined other European leaders in rejecting any U.S. move to take control of Greenland, warning that it would damage NATO unity. Wadephul and Rubio also agreed on the alliance's role in securing peace in Ukraine, reaffirmed their commitment to NATO's Article 5 Mutual Defense Clause, and he called for a united push to further punish Iran following its crackdown on protests.
And as I just mentioned, at the last NATO summit, the United States of America clearly committed itself to the defense of Europe and to Article 5. And that is how we perceive the United States of America, both in the political and military parts of NATO, namely fully of Europe's side, fully committed to defending law and freedom in the Western world. There is no doubt about that whatsoever, and I would advise us Europeans not to question things that are not being questioned in Washington.
The Trump administration's decision to open a criminal investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell drew condemnation from former Fed chiefs and a chorus of criticism from key members of Trump's Republican Party on Monday, following unusually sharp public rebuke from Powell, calling the move a pretext to win presidential influence over interest rates. Powell, who was nominated by Trump to lead the Fed in late 2017 and confirmed by the Senate to the position in early 2018, will complete his term as Fed chair in May, but he is not obliged to leave its Washington-based Board of Governors until 2028. The criminal indictment threat emerged about 2 weeks before Trump's effort to fire another Fed official, Governor Lisa Cook, will be argued before the Supreme Court. The action against Fed Chair Powell marks a dramatic escalation in President Donald Trump's pressure campaign against a top policy-making body for the U.S. economy, which Trump thinks is not lowering interest rates fast enough. Up next on your screens, we'll get you more details on this. Why does this matter? Since returning to office a year ago, Trump has sought to bend the U.S. government to his will by firing tens of thousands of civil servants, eliminating internal watchdog positions, and dismissing Democratic appointees from agencies like the Federal Trade Commission that was set up to be run in an independent fashion. The Fed is just one of its targets, but perhaps the most significant. The Federal Reserve is tasked with keeping inflation in check, unemployment low, and the financial system operating smoothly. It does this by setting the baseline for the cost of credit. If the Fed sets the interest rate too high, that can discourage borrowing, which can weigh on consumption and investment and slow the economy. If the Fed sets interest rates too low, the economy can overheat, leading to higher inflation. The Fed sharply hiked the federal funds rate in 2022 and 2023 to combat inflation following the COVID pandemic and has been gradually lowering it since 2024. It cut the rate 3 times at the end of the last year. And now we try to understand, what is Powell being investigated for? Powell said in a video statement that he has been served with subpoenas by the Justice Department for his testimony to the Senate Banking Committee last July about the renovation. That could indicate the Justice Department is preparing to indict him for lying to Congress, a charge the department also brought against Comey. That case was thrown out of court. Powell has denied wrongdoing, and the Justice Department has not yet commented on the investigation. Let's get to other updates from the U.S. Minnesota and Illinois filed a lawsuit against President Donald Trump's administration on Monday, seeking to block a surge of immigration enforcement officers into their states following the fatal shooting of a Minnesota woman by an immigration and customs enforcement officer last week. The lawsuit, brought by Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, names as defendants the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and several U.S. immigration officials, asking a federal court in Minnesota to declare the surge unconstitutional and unlawful. The state said they would ask the court to impose a temporary restraining order on the federal surge as soon as Tuesday, when a hearing will be held.
We're filing against the United States Department of Homeland Security to end the unlawful, unprecedented surge of the federal law enforcement agents into Minnesota, because this has to stop. We ask the courts to end the DHS unlawful behavior in our state, the intimidation, the threats, the violence. We ask the courts to end the tactics on our places of worship, our schools, our courts, our marketplaces, our hospitals, and even funeral homes. The deployment of thousands of armed mass DHS agents to Minnesota has done our state serious harm. This is, in essence, a federal invasion of the Twin Cities and Minnesota, and it must stop.
Illinois has filed a similar federal lawsuit against the Trump administration. The Illinois lawsuit asks the court to block U.S. Customs and Border Protection from conducting civil immigration enforcement in the state, while seeking to curb tactics such as the use of tear gas, trespassing on private property, and the concealing of license plates to mask official operations. Anti-immigration and customs enforcement protesters in Minneapolis continue to express anger during demonstrations. The tension erupted in Minnesota last week when a federal immigration officer shot and killed Rainy Good, a 37-year-old mother of three who was observing the federal law enforcement action. U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Noam accused Rainey of domestic terrorism. 4 migrants have died while in custody of U.S. immigration authorities over the first 10 days of 2026 alone. You're watching DD India Live. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, in a first of its kind, Union Budget 2026-27 will be presented on February 1st, which is a Sunday. Celebrations.
This week on Defense Dynamics, why India's development of electromagnetic railguns so important for modern battlefield doctrine? What is Drishti 10 and why is it emerging as a critical pillar of India's maritime security? Why India's successful conduct of long-duration ground test of scramjet combustor so strategic for India's hypersonic missile program? And in my take, we decode why Pakistan is pushing the JF-17 across the Islamic world. Watch Defense Dynamics this Wednesday at 8 PM IST only on DD India.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live. On the second and last day of his official visit to India, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz will be travelling to Bengaluru, while earlier on Monday, the visiting dignitary met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in India's western state of Gujarat to push for deeper economic and security ties between the South Asian nation and Europe's largest. Here's more in this report.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz held delegation-level talks in Gandhinagar on Monday. The two leaders discussed the entire gamut of bilateral relations between the two nations. They called for giving further momentum to ties to elevate the strategic partnership. Following the talks, both sides exchanged and adopted MOUs in the field of defense and security, trade and economy, critical and emerging technologies, science and technology, renewable energy, green hydrogen, among many others.
रक्षा और सुरक्षा में बढ़ता सहयोग हमारे आपसी भरोसे और साझी सोच का प्रतीक है। रक्षा व्यापार से जुड़ी प्राथमिकताओं को सरल बनाने के लिए मैं चांसलर मर्ज का हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। हम रक्षा उद्योगों के बीच सहयोग बढ़ाने के लिए एक रोडमैप उस पर भी काम करेंगे, जिससे को डेवलपमेंट और को प्रोडक्शन के नए अवसर खुलेंगे।
Prime Minister Modi highlighted how India and Germany are expanding their cooperation in clean energy and secure resilient supply chains.
रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी के क्षेत्र में भारत और जर्मनी की प्राथमिकताएं समान है। इसमें सहयोग को बढ़ाने के लिए हमने इंडिया जर्मनी सेंटर ऑफ एक्सीलेंस स्थापित करने का निर्णय लिया है। ये नॉलेज, टेक्नोलॉजी एंड इनोवेशन का साझा मंच बनेगा। हम क्लाइमेट, एनर्जी, अर्बन डेवलपमेंट और अर्बन मोबिलिटी जैसे क्षेत्रों में मिलकर नई परियोजनाओं को आगे बढ़ा रहे हैं। ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन में दोनों देशों की कंपनियों का नया मेगा प्रोजेक्ट भविष्य की ऊर्जा के लिए एक गेम चेंजर साबित होगा।
The German Chancellor spoke of India as a partner of choice in the context of expanding and strengthening his nation's relations beyond Europe and transatlantic.
India is a desired partner, a partner of choice for Germany, and the preconditions for a renewed and deepened and intensified partnership couldn't be more favorable. The highly dynamic India and the highly technological Germany, we share essential interests, and this is what we build upon.
The two leaders also held productive discussions with Indian and German business leaders at the CEO Forum in Ahmedabad. Chancellor Merz also suggested the European Union and India could finalize a free trade agreement as early as the end of this month, as presidents of European Commission and European Council are set to visit India towards the end of the month.
He laid particular emphasis on Germany's very strong support for the early conclusion of the India-EU FTA. As you are all aware, in another fortnight's time, the EC President and the European Council President both will be visiting New Delhi, where we hope to take these discussions forward towards a favorable conclusion.
The EU recently concluded a trade pact with South America's Mercosur after talks for 25 years. This has raised hopes for the finalization of its deal with India as well. Bureau Report, DD India.
Later, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, accompanied by India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, visited the Adalat Stepwell in Gujarat, a 15th century architectural marvel and a symbol of rich confluence of heritage, sustainability and community life. The stepwell served as a water source, place for community gathering and cool refuge for locals and travellers. India-Germany friendship finds inspiration in shared values of sustainability, resilience and human-centered development. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and German Chancellor Merz also inaugurated the International Kite Festival 2026 along the west bank of the Sabarmati River front in Ahmedabad. As many as 1,071 kite flyers, including 135 from 50 countries, 65 from 13 Indian states and 871 from 16 districts of Gujarat are participating in the festival. Germany, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Jordan, Australia, Indonesia are some of the countries participating. DD India's Tanvi Taneja gets us this report.
A bright, warm, sunny day in Ahmedabad with brisk breezes to lift the kites aloft along the Sabarmati River front. The International Kite Festival, underway from 12th to 14th of January in Gujarat, brings with it the message of peace and harmony. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz took a heritage walk at the specially curated Ambavad site for the occasion. 108 Indian musicians presented the Grand Gujarat Symphony for the German Chancellor. The two leaders later also tried a hand at kite flying in the festive atmosphere. Multiple kites of Indian tricolour embedded in one string with Operation Sindoor mast was another highlight of the festival. Kite flyers from 50 countries and 13 Indian states participated in this festival.
This kite for this festival. This is my traditional coat. This for every day. Usually, yes. I love your Prime Minister. Okay. So brilliant and
big kite festival. I visit Soti Kite Festival International and Gujarat Kite Festival, very nice. Many country delegation participating in here. I made Indian flag kite, Delta kite, very nice.
It's so nice. Kites flying, people, nice, so nice. We are so happiness to stay here.
This year I'm making a Gujarat kite. That Gujarat kite is displayed all over the Gujarat in that Gir jungles, that city side jalis, then Statue of Unity, then play of the kites, then Navratri, then Somnath temple, everything Jakis in my kites.
It's a wonderful feeling, it's a wonderful event, one of the biggest kite festivals in the country. So I would like to request all the viewers that you should get into the kite flying. It's not just for the entertainment, it have a lot of health benefits too. Postural correction, it's a kind of wellness therapy, holistic therapy for your frozen neck or text neck or the cervical problems, eyesight, lack of vitamin D. You get out of your comfortable space in the AC rooms and cabins, come into the ground, get more sunlight.
So in the heritage city of Ahmedabad, kite flying during Uttarayan is really rooted in Gujarat's cultural expression. People fly kites on January 14th every year. They transform their shared rooftops into collective spaces of joy. I'm here at the International Kite Festival on the Sabarmati riverfront, where kitists from 50 countries, 13 states are here, and there are about 1,000 plus kites flying in the sky right now. Their enthusiasm is high. The mood is very upbeat. Well, the wind is only catching up for these kites to roar higher in the sky. With camera person Anand Kachap, this is Tanvi Taneja for DD India.
India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the Union Budget on February 1st, which is a Sunday. It will be for the first time when the Union Budget will be presented on a Sunday. Addressing a press conference ahead of the 28th Conference of Speakers and Presiding Officers of the Commonwealth, Speaker of the Lower House of Indian Parliament, Om Birla, confirmed that the government will stick to the tradition of presenting the budget on the first day of February, despite it being a weekend. The BWF India Open Super 750 badminton tournament is set to begin today at the Indira Gandhi Indoor Stadium in New Delhi. Indian players were handed a tricky draw as 2022 champion Lakshya Sen was pitted in an all-Indian battle against rising star Ayush Shetty. Trisa Jolly and Gayatri Gopichand will be up against Ornika Jongsata Ponpan and Sukita Suwachai of Thailand. Lohri, the midwinter harvest festival, is being celebrated across North India with festive fervour and enthusiasm. Families gather around crackling bonfires, sharing festive feasts, dancing to lively dhol beats and embracing the warmth and joy that characterize Lohri celebrations. That's it in this edition of DD India Live, but news and updates continue. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.